Good evening and welcome to the Author Showcase series, a virtual experience of the South Florida Writers Association, August 2022 edition. It is one of our programs aimed at supporting writers and the literary arts in general. My name is Evelyn Benson, and I am your host and producer of the Author Showcase series. And I will be introducing our featured author, Jan Smolders, presenting his 10th and latest novel, The Costa Rica Connection. Jan Smolders is a Belgian and American citizen, former business executive who lived in Belgium, Paris, Yokohama, and Singapore before settling in the United States of America. He is a chemical engineer with additional degrees in nuclear sciences from the University of Leuven, Belgium. He ran industrial corporations worldwide in the steel and copper mining industries. After his corporate work, he joined the Clinton Foundation in its AIDS assistance and poverty reduction activities in the Caribbean and South America. In the last 10 years, he published 10 novels. Many of them describe in the background social situations he has seen and worked in during his long career. You can check his 10 books on Amazon, Books and Books, and on his website, www.jsmolders.com. That's www.jsmolders.com. At age 81, he and his spouse Luke left Florida after 23 years to be near their youngest son and family in Valencia, Santa Clarita, California. After many years of running marathons in 3 continents, he has now turned into a devoted long-distance swimmer. So friends, fellow writers, how about a warm round of applause for novelist Jan Smolders?
Or good evening, or good morning, wherever you are. Wherever you are, you're welcome to my presentation of my latest novel, the Costa Rica Connection. I appreciate the opportunity to make this presentation, thanks to the good efforts of Books and Books, and also, of course, of the South Florida Writers Association. I appreciate the opportunity very much, and I'll do my best to make it as interesting as possible. From the few words I spoke, maybe you already gathered that I have an accent. The ones who don't know me may wonder where the accent comes from. The accent comes from Belgium. It is Flemish or Dutch, and it's the same thing. And my wife and I, we both have the Belgian and the American nationality. We moved 52 years ago. We moved from Belgium to Japan, and we packed very carefully, and we packed everything, including our accent. So we still have our accent with us, and still people can make fun of our accent whenever they want to. So that's great. Okay, that for the accent. Now, just regarding languages, in this book, I'm dealing with languages in certain ways. Language can be an interesting tool. I just read that the Ukrainians in their war with the Russians have a leg up with their language, because Ukrainians speak basically, many Ukrainians speak not only Ukrainian but also Russian, whereas the Russians mostly speak only Russian. So the Ukrainians can listen in on the Russian, and it doesn't work the other way. So that's an interesting aspect I thought of, that the war and the language is the tool. In the book also, I use the language as a tool to fool some bad gangsters. I think you enjoy that language can be used for that. Now, to my novel, I have written 10 novels over the last 10 years. And, you know, since I am writing 10, you can probably assume that I love writing. And yes, I do love writing. I like writing. It's the best thing, the thing I like most to do, actually. And I spend most of my time on it. But I just don't write for fun. And I also have started writing because I was really gripped by certain situations I saw in my very varied life that I have had, I think, over the last 40, 50 years. I have been in many, many situations where I was happy or sad or angry or bitter or really shaking my head that, you know, how is this possible, this kind of situation? So I felt compelled to write about issues and bring messages about these issues. But I didn't want to write an academic article or a book about this. I wouldn't be able to do that anyway. But you know, I decided that I would write stories, novels, basically. And stories play against a certain background. So that background really is the message of the book. I will write a story about, you know, AIDS, for instance, my first story. I write a book about a journalist who fights a love story and everything. But, you know, ultimately it is the message in the book is the background, what's happening in the AIDS situation. So most of the issues I describe are things that I have somehow experienced. I've been an immigrant. I worked in international business on practically every continent for the last 50 years. For 50 years, I have managed businesses in different countries. I worked in different industries. I worked in the steel industry, in the textile industry, in the copper mining industry, in the consulting industry, in the charitable organization industry. And I worked in many positions, just from engineer to marketing person to general manager to the president of companies, etc. So I have a lot of experience that I can draw from for my books. That's how I've written 10 books, and they all bring messages. And they all are connected to my personal experience, except for the one that we're discussing today. The one that we discussed today, I've written for some other reasons that I will explain a little bit later on. So I would like now to show quickly the 9 books that I have already written and say what the message is in that book. In this book, my first one, Fire Games, this is a book about AIDS, the shenanigans actually from this pharmaceutical industry in the manufacturing and sale of medicines to treat AIDS. That was my first book. It plays in the Dominican Republic. My second book is The Bridge of Whispers. It deals about, it writes about joint ventures, setting up joint ventures with Japanese companies and what can happen and what things should not happen, etc. And what the bad guys do, what the good bad guys do. So that is my second book, and the issue is what the shenanigans again in joint ventures. Then the third book is The Convenient Fund. That deals with charitable organizations, and they're generally charitable, but as everywhere, you find certain crooks, and of course, since I write novels, I have to find some bad people also. So I have stories about some bad people in working in such organizations and taking advantage of the situation. I'll go a little quicker. I have this book, the Tennessee Tremors, is about soil pollution. I've had a lot of personal experience with soil pollution and what certain companies, even with very respectable name or respected names, they are there to do. The next book, the fifth one, is Ripping the Veil. It deals with discrimination against AIDS sufferers. Discrimination that's illegal in most countries, in almost every country, but the laws against that discrimination are disregarded in many countries. What is that about? Alone in Boca Raton is a book about a Mexican student who immigrates and encounters all kinds of resistance. This book, Harvest of War, is a very successful book. It deals with the last weeks of the war, World War II, in my village in Belgium, and I am old enough to have lived through that at the age of 5. So I know exactly what happened there. I should not remember too much, but it made such a big impression on me, I suppose, that I do remember, and I've checked my memories with many other people. So that book is about the war, World War II, and what happens in a small village when the liberation comes. The book has been a finalist in the Beverly Hills Book Competition. And I have Cloning Galinda here. Cloning Galinda is a book about fracking in Ohio, and what happens in a village when they start fracking there. This book also has has also been selected as a finalist in the Beverly Hills Book Award competition. Then I have my 9th book, this is Birds Sing Before Sunrise. This book is about the resistance of the petroleum industry against solar panels in a big mining project where they want to make a big mine high in the mountains, independent from oil, and work solely with solar energy. And that is again a personal experience of mine. This book has won the Beverly Hills Book Competition in 3 years ago. So, and now we come to the book that I want to talk about today, the Costa Rica Connection. In this book, we have a Belgian protagonist and a US protagonist. I like to use these two different nationalities because I use the opportunity to point out certain differences in ways the countries are run, Belgium and the United States, are very, very different. You all know probably how the United States is run, more or less, or we try to run it. But anyway, let me just point a few things out about Belgium that are very stark contrast with Belgium, with the United States. In Belgium, university education, including university, is basically free. The tuition is very, very small, less than $500. So it's maybe $1,000 in the most prestigious ones. But anyway, it is basically free education all the way. Everybody in Belgium has healthcare insurance. It's obligatory. If you don't have it, you get penalized. The gun policies are very, very different from here, and you see it in the results that I pointed out already. Then that I will point out, excuse me. And the social safety net is also a totally different situation. So I like to use the presence of these two different people to point out certain differences in the book. And now I want to mention the issues that I discuss in this book, the Costa Rica Connections. I discuss two issues. The first one is guns. Guns, well, it bothers me personally, and maybe many of you, and maybe some not, but anyway, it bothers me a hell of a lot. But we have so many problems with the guns in this country. I've done a lot of research on guns for my earlier books too, and I repeated that research to a certain extent for this book, and it's still the same story. I'll just throw some figures out. We have half of the guns in the world are owned by United States citizens. Excuse me. We have just 5% of the world, but we have 50% of the guns. That's one thing. We have 39,000 deaths. That's the last year span measured, the last measured year span, 39,000 deaths. You compare that to Belgium again, it's 130 against 39,000. Of course, Belgium is only 1/30 of the United States, but the ratio is 12 to 1, 12 gun deaths against 1 Belgium. And that's not all. A lot of these gun deaths are suicides, a big, big portion. If you take the suicides out of the equation in both countries, then you end up with a ratio of 32 to 1. In other words, 32 times more murders with guns than here than in Belgium. An argument that's often used by politicians is that it's mental illness. Mental illness is a big problem here. Yeah, it is. And actually, it is it is a 3 times worse problem in the United States than in Europe, in the EU. 3 times more, but not 32 times more. And the ratio of the murders is 32 to 1, and the ratio of the United States is 3 to 1. So mental illness is a small part of the story, but is certainly not the big part. So that's why many friends came to me and asked me, why don't you write about guns? You know, well, I did. And so you'll find some stories about guns in the book. Now, the other issue is opioids. And opioids, you know, there are, you know about the issues, I'm sure. You know, it's a huge issue. Many people have been touched personally by this. And, you know, there are many, well, the Del Rey area in Florida has been well known for a lot of abuse of the detoxification efforts that are being made to have the victims of the opioid plague. So I would like to read to you an excerpt of the book to just give you a picture of what this what that issue is. I'm talking about a guy that's named Jonathan. The excerpt illustrates some of the issues facing opioid addicts when they enter treatment centers, where corrupt practices between the centers, prisons, insurance companies, insurance marketers, and others can ruin lives. Jack the Backer, manager of a detox center in Florida, is tormented by a disagreement he has with the owner of his company. Today, in Belgium, Jack has had too many Stellas in Belgian cafes, and he has a restless night with a dream. And in that dream, he sees Jonathan Summers, a patient he knows well, in a phone discussion with a friend. At some point, Jack tries to intervene, but of course he can't. He's just dreaming. This is the text of the excerpt. Jack saw youngster Jonathan lying on the bed, iPhone resting on his chest, unshaven, skin and bones, ashen-faced. Jonathan was talking on the phone with his buddy Josh, a frequent visitor of his at the center and an enthusiastic NRA member. Jonathan had entered the center for the second time 29 days ago. His insurance would allow him 30 days of treatment for his opioid addiction, barely sufficient to offer a slim chance of no relapse, and only 1/3 of what good insurance would allow. I need you, buddy. I really do, Jonathan pleaded, panic in his voice, speech slurred, pupils barely visible. They're kicking me out, Josh. I cough 500 by noon tomorrow, or they'll throw my ass out. Nowhere else to turn. Called everybody, no luck. Lou and Ray won't talk to me. My mom neither. Doctor says I must have at least 2 more weeks here or all's lost again. I know, lost again. Josh seemed to understand, but sounded less than enthused. 500 again, eh? Same story as Thursday, but forgot. Memory loss, Jack knew. Jack tried to raise a hand, but he was paralyzed. He shouted, I promise I'll help you, Jonathan. I talked to Mr. Moore. Jonathan didn't seem to hear Jack's words. 6 days ago, just before he left for Belgium, Jack had intervened with Chuck Moore, the owner of the detox center, to let Jonathan, who was far from healed, stay for at least 2 more weeks, lest he suffer yet another relapse. Jonathan stared up at the TV against the wall. The Marlins game was muted. He lowered his voice. Thursday? Thursday, Josh? Well, you may be right. He sounded embarrassed. I know it was Thursday. And your mom? Your mom, you said? Her too? Josh's tone suggested it was her obligation, not his, to bail Jonathan out once again. Jonathan looked dejected. Sold her pearls, she found out. You're shitting me? She's dropping you for some bloody pearls? Took her iPad 2 weeks ago and earrings. Jonathan dropped his head. Man, you blame her? Huh? Blame her? The reproach peeled through the room. Jack knew even worse stories about poor, caring Mrs. Summers and her son. Jonathan took a couple of seconds before responding, his words barely audible. Still got my 2 Glocks, G48 and 19X. Less than 2 years. Thought you'd like them. Worth more than 500. Come on, Jonathan. You know my collection. Don't have that kind of dough lying around anyway. I know you don't need any more guns. I will pay you. You know me. I'll get the job as soon as I'm clean. Please, George. Jack heard a click. Don't hang up. Jonathan smashed his phone onto the floor and cried. Another Stella alarm went off in the bedroom, and Jack pushed himself off the low bed and rushed to the bathroom. That is a story about opioids. The problem is very severe. The problem with opioids is, in figures, in metrics, is the fentanyl deaths, just fentanyl, but that's like 70% of the total cases. That's 73,000 for the last year, 73,000. Again, it's a very bad situation compared to, for instance, Europe. The total EU has 10,000 as compared to the 73,000 of the United States, of course, and the EU has 100 million more people than the USA. So it's a very, very bad, sad story. Now, to the story. The reader will travel in the book from Belgium to the USA, and then to Costa Rica. Jeanne, a Belgian woman in her 30s, will make a job move, has decided to make a job. She's a specialist, a very specialized physical therapist. There's a very strong specialization in the University of Louvain for that. And she got sponsored. She got sponsored by a health company in the United States. So she's moving to the States, and she happens to meet a few days, no, a couple of months before she leaves for the United States. She happens to meet Jack the Bagger, and he is the manager of a detox center in the Delray area. And the romance developed. They have common interests also, that they're both anti-gun. Jack's wife got murdered 2 years ago by probably drug smugglers who wanted her to cooperate with her, but she didn't want to do that, and she got murdered. But there are still rumors floating around that Jack would have been involved in that murder. Anyway, romance develops, and it develops into a romance, and they move in together, and then it turns out that Jack's boss, the owner of the company, is actually a dirty operator. He colludes with other companies, with prison chiefs, with politicians, to maximize his profits, basically, and screw the patient. And he is also a strong NRA member, excuse me. So that is the situation that develops. And then Jeanne gets pregnant, and just a few days later, Jack disappears. He disappears, no trace, no nothing, and the questions are many. So why did he disappear? Was he murdered? Was he kidnapped? Did he just run away because he didn't like to become a father? Did he, did he go in hiding somewhere? It's just, who might have killed him? The gangsters or the NRA because he spoke up, and yes, the NRA because they attacked him. So it's a very complicated situation. And then at some point, they decide that for all kinds of reasons I explain in the book, they explain that they decide, or they conclude that if Jack would be alive, he would almost certainly be in Costa Rica. And I'll explain that. I explained that in the book why that is a bit complicated. So it takes the readers then to Costa Rica on this chase in very dangerous circumstances, because there are gangsters operating there in the south east of Costa Rica, near the Panamanian border, and that's where they're headed with the story. I would like now to read an excerpt of Jeanne, who has arrived in the area, in that dangerous area, and who, she's, of course, overwhelmed by the facts. I read about her situation. It's very early morning in the Costa Rican jungle on the Atlantic coast. Jeanne is a couple of months pregnant. She's a Belgian woman carrying a child from an American partner. He has disappeared a week ago. Jeanne tries to track him down with the help of his father, who has reasons to believe his son might have fled there, to the area, as I explained. During the night, she's been panicking, imagining the worst possible scenarios. This morning, she looks for relief from the stresses and fears that have sometimes overwhelmed her. This is a text of the excerpt. Jeanne tiptoed out at dawn alone. She had no problem finding the narrow path that ran down to the beach in the semi-dark. Dawn hadn't come soon enough. She had waited too many hours for it. She didn't care about her looks or attire, the clothes she slept in. She needed to be free of everything and everyone, not having to answer anyone's questions, or tolerate gazes. This was her time, hers, and her babies. She didn't look back to check whether anyone had seen her leave. She didn't care. She was deep in the mysterious jungle that ran south along the Atlantic Ocean towards Boca del Toro, 40 miles away from the Panamanian border. Her only companions were the Trubials and their morning songs. They were melodious before dark. They were melodious and sweet, unlike the lugubrious cries during the night from animals hurt or in love. She elbowed her way through branches and twigs and bushes to enter the path, a narrow, overgrown trail meandering through a richness of trees, bushes, flowers, herbs, and aromas. As she stared at the ocean 300 feet away, rows of jumbo-sized crabs lined the path on both sides, right at her toes, leaving less than 10 inches for her to pass. She wanted to tell someone about the creatures, but couldn't. Her baby couldn't hear her yet. The spectacle reminded her of her mother's tales, how on warm evenings she and her neighbors would sit or stand aimlessly for hours, lined up on their sidewalks in the narrow streets of the small Flemish village to gossip the time away until sunset and sometimes beyond. She wondered what the crabs' gossip was all about at this early hour. As she set foot on the path and progressed, the critters created orderly, no rush, one by one, like teeth, orderly, no rush, one by one, like teeth of an enormous zipper that opens to free the trail for her feet. Where the path ended and the beach gloriously spread out before her eyes, the sand was so fine and soft that it felt like she was treading on her fluffiest towel, her toes being tickled on all sides by the tiny granules that ran between them like lukewarm water. The cloudless sky was still dark, but soon the sun would majestically rise out of the Atlantic and show colors of the rainbow, one at a time, from a crimson red to a pearl white. She sauntered into the cleared area in front of her, about half a mile long. No broken toys, soft drink bottles, or empty sardine cans spoiled the view. The beach was deserted, but for a couple of dead birds and a torn volleyball net hanging loose. Crystalline aqua water quietly lapped the beach. While the sun slowly turned yellow-white and the skies started showing off their azure blue, she ventured farther south, where nature had been left untouched. Fallen tree limbs and trunks of all sizes and shapes clogged the beach. Some posed as startling artwork, erosion dating them by their smoothness. Dead birds and fish in various stages of decomposition dotted spaces between twigs, branches, trunks, and coconut shells. No smell of death was noticeable, as it mingled naturally with the more pleasant aromas and fragrances offered by the jungle flora. Birds circling overhead and insects swarming below signaled that some life was left on the sand. Stepping on and over trunks and branches, disposed of by Mother Nature, laid down to rest in the sun many months or years before, Jeanne scratched her bare legs as she tumbled. She made her way to a giant branch that magically passed for a natural cradle. She took small twigs to clean out dust Dried leaves and decomposed insects gathered at the bottom of the crib. Lay down in the curve, eyes on the sky, limbs loose, head resting on the old, smooth wood surface. The low roar of the ocean was interrupted by a howling monkey. Was he unhappy as she was? Jan's mind wandered as it had done all night long. She talked to her baby and whispered that in a few months he or she would be able to see and feel nature with her the way she did now on this magnificent, untouched and untrodden beach. The soft breeze playing games with her loose hair felt like caresses from Jack. She felt the pain of missing the father of her baby. In this cradle that Mother Nature had lovingly crafted for her, she tried to give her tortured mind a little respite. You will see your father, baby, you will see your father. I will not rest until he can hold you in her strong arms, she said out loud, and she dreamed. That's the end of the excerpt. Now back to the regular world, the normal world, to end this presentation. I felt to write about these issues. I think I feel strongly about these issues, and I think many of you do. I felt compelled, but I also enjoyed, just like with all the other books, I really enjoyed writing the story. And I hope that readers will enjoy the book as much as I have enjoyed writing it. Thank you for your attention. All the books that I wrote are available on Amazon. Thank you very much for your attention.